Looks like you hit the wrong event. So give us a moment, everyone. I need to do a little troubleshooting here.
It was a go live.
It might still work though. I think I'm seeing that there is a live. Okay.
It was the only go live button in the upper left-hand corner of the box, Kate.
That's right. And you know what? It is showing your live. So you are good to go. So I'm going to drop off, and then Doug, you can read the title and key lesson, and we'll see you later.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Here's today's title for the talk: Spiritual Math. Truth plus truth equals freedom. We could probably just stop right there, huh, Guy?
That'd be all right with me. Let's go on.
Yeah. Let me read the key lesson here. It says, no one wins freedom who hasn't first realized the invisible relationship between resistance and revelation, and how one cannot appear without the other, wherein to see that they secretly serve one another is to put both in your service. All right, Guy, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. Hello, good morning. Let me get my desktop arranged so that I don't make any unintended mistakes. And I think that if everything's copacetic, we can get started. First, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, of course, whatever day, time it is. We're in the right place for those of us that are looking to do what these meetings are all about. And in this instance, the topic is truth plus truth equals freedom. You know the expression 2 + 2 = 4. It's math. It's under law. And I want to help you understand today that there are certain laws that are all the time operating around and within us, that were we to have the awareness of these laws and the accompanying understanding that would allow us to use them in their intended form, that it would equal a revelation, it would equal a new understanding of ourselves that we are obviously looking for, or we wouldn't be here working together during these talks. And by the way, I'll be back at the foundation on Sunday and for my insight timer on Saturday. So, nice deep breath. We're here, meaning in this space that we're sharing, where we will look at insights, ideas, principles, and laws, because of a single purpose, a single reason that we all share. Even those who aren't here are sharing in this reason, but they don't know it yet. We are all in search of ourselves. We are born to seek. But as is evident at this point, again, or you wouldn't be joining me, we search for ourselves, but we keep running into one dead end after another. And we know that it's a dead end that we've run into, because no matter how open that pathway seems in the moment, no matter how positive we feel when we hatch that new stage one, square one, like I talked about yesterday, eventually we see that the thing turns out to be another loop, another circle. We're back to ourselves. And it's confounding because, in essence, where are we to look? I mean, no question that we're sincere if we are. Where are we to look? Why, with all of the effort put into looking at you, they, this, them, the laws, the government, my health, looking at all this, why am I always back to feeling like I'm missing something and I must still again search? And the answer is because we only know to look for what our present understanding tells us is missing. This is key. We only know to look for what our present level of understanding tells us is missing. And as we become a little clearer with this idea that obviously a moment comes, I'm stirred, my senses, everything says, look at this. And as I am directed to look at what I see as the source of the problem, inherent in the definition of that dark moment is the cause of it, and inherent in the cause of that moment is what I must do to control or otherwise change that moment. So on one side, we just keep coming back to square one, but on the other side, as we get there, we run into ideas that we begin to hear, well, look, really nothing's missing from your life. It's the most confounding idea in the world. How can a spiritual teacher tells me nothing is missing in my life? And every spiritual teacher tells you that, every true teacher. However, true teachers don't tell you what it is. They don't sell you what you need. They help you see that what's missing in the moment is the eyes, as Christ would say, the eyes to see the truth of that fact that I only know to look where my mind points to as the source of my pain and the solution to getting rid of that discomfort. Now, these eyes that see belong to another order of being, another issue. We know there's another order of being, a higher order of awareness. We're called by it. But it's as though something interrupts that call and interferes with the communication between the higher parts of ourselves that know that we are in search of a certain kind of realization, and that directs us along this road, much like the prodigal son, sending us out into the world, believing that we're going to manifest, in quotes, the secret of our success, and when all of that's in place, then we'll have at long last reached home. But if you know the story of the prodigal son, he didn't even come close to returning home until he could see with great clarity that everything that he had preferred, determined would bring him to this place in his life where he'd be content was a lie. And at that point, he went through something called metanoia. Christ called this turning point in a person's life, exemplified by the turning around from this world to look in another world, really an interior turning. But this metanoia, this new moment, refers to the possibility of a new part of ourselves that we are not present to, bringing us into what I'm going to call, just for now, the seeing moment. The seeing moment. Yesterday I said that there are miracles. And the first miracle is the discovery and all that it leads to, that we have been blind without knowing it. And why is that the first miracle? Not to mention that I don't particularly want to know that I've been blind. The evidence is there. The reason it's the first miracle, this idea of metanoia, the eyes to see, is because how would I ever know I've been blind unless something were in me I didn't know before, capable of seeing that I am misunderstanding, capable of showing me that everything I see is a misdirection, an incomplete step. So that in an instant, by a miracle, and it is, a new order of awareness is awakened, in which I can see everywhere where I took missteps, misunderstood, because I was living in an order of awareness that thought it could see but could not. How many times in your life have you thought, yeah, I know, I see, I know what's wrong with you, I know what's wrong with them, I know what's wrong with me. And then you find out that all that you were looking at was a series of deeply conditioned thoughts struggling to control or change the condition that brought them up, so that you could resume this familiar sense of self that believes it sees when in fact it is blind. The seeing moment. I'm going to tell you a little story, personal story, about one of my own seeing moments, because it'll deeply impact how you hear the rest of what I want to talk to you about. I don't know exactly what age I was at. I remember being upstairs in my parents' house, laying on my bed, and I was talking to, I'll leave out the name to protect the innocent, I was talking to, we'll say, the Wilsons, and they were a set of twin sisters. And at one point, one of the twin sisters got off the phone, kind of seemed to be upset, and the other one stayed on the phone. I really loved both of these girls. They were my best friends in the day. And I said to the one that was on the phone, I said, "What's going on with X?" And Y said, "You really don't know, do you?" I said, "Well, of course I don't know." Now, I need to preface this part of the story with a little bit of inside information. It's not that critical, but it does help paint the story. So now I can tell you how old I was. I was 16 years old. And I had a promising football career as a high school player. And I got paralyzed in a football injury. Remained paralyzed to this day, my left leg. And I had to wear this god-awful clunky brace that lifted my foot. I was relegated to the worst part of the PE. Everything was, my friends abandoned me. It was a real nightmare back in the day, I'll tell you. And I had no idea of what was going on inside of me as a result of all this pain and resisting this absolute sudden shock to the whole of my life, my path. And so back to the story, she said, you really don't know, do you? She said, "I'll tell you, you may not want to hear it, and you may never want to talk to me again, but I'll tell you." And of course, who wants to hear what follows that? But I said, "Okay, sure, tell me." And then in 6 words, she said, "All you talk about is yourself. That's all you ever talk about," she said to me. Now, try to see this. First of all, who would actually believe that all they ever talk about, all they're ever interested in, is themselves? None of us believe that. That the whole of our relationship with life is predicated on this very tight little solar system of self, where everything begins with I and ends with I. I had no idea. But in that moment, in that single impression, where I could not argue the fact because I was so consumed with self-pity, so angry about what life had dealt me, that I had no awareness. I could not see from the smallest angle that everything I spoke about was about me and returned to me and was intended to enhance or somehow support me. And just to close that part of the talk, in that moment, when I hung up with her and I thanked her as best I could, I vowed to myself that I would never use the word I again when talking to somebody. I would remove the word I, the sense of I, from my vocabulary. And fast forward a few years later, I was out on a date with somebody and I had no idea. She said, "You know, you never talk about yourself." I didn't know that either at that point. I just had acted on the power of a single impression, which is the context for our talk. The power of a single impression. If we had time, if we were in our classroom, I might get some students up. I'd say, "Can you tell me a moment of a single impression that actually changed your life?" And if we were honest, the impression that changed our life wasn't that somebody said they loved me, that somebody gave me some money, that I won a trip, or I won this or that, or suddenly I had some possession I didn't have before. The moment of a single impression that changes our lives, and I trust you can see this, always has to do with something that we did not know was true before that moment, let alone that we did not know was true about ourselves. Because in the moment of that single impression, I can remember, for instance, some teachers that I had in grade school, Mr. McFadden. There was something about the way he carried himself, the impression. It was attractive to me. I was attracted to the impression of the way he manifested his life, the way he spoke, his command. That which was attracted to what creating this impression in me about him was in fact a corresponding possibility in my own character, so that impression was revealing to me the possibility of something that I could in fact know and have, not as he imitated it, and not as I would imitate it, but as a new awareness in myself that would foster that kind of behavior. So when X said to me, all you ever talk about is yourself, it was phenomenal. I knew it was true. I didn't have to think to myself, is that true? Because there had been corresponding moments and conditions where it was evident. But at the same time that she said that was true, I did not want it to be. Now look at this fundamental contradiction. I can see that it's true. I can see all I do is think about myself. I can see all I know how to do is blame others. I can see this immense impatience born out of demands I don't know I come into the moment with. I can see all of that's true, and yet at the same moment that I see that's true, I don't want it to be true. What is that about? I know certain things are true about myself, and I don't want to know them. Who doesn't want to know what is true? Who rejects and resists any revelation that is less than flattering, or at least moving towards something that will free me? So this points to a fundamental division that goes before us to ensure no impression serves its purpose. A fundamental division that goes before us to ensure that no impression serves its true purpose. What was the true purpose of the impression of what X told me? It was to release me from an unseen narcissism, a love of myself that was fashioned in the form of judgment and hatred of others. So until I understand the nature of an impression, its purpose, I'll never understand the conditions that bring those impressions into play. That's what I want to look at with you. How we can take a truth and put them together, not with our mind, but see that they have already been joined together in the name of something greater than ourselves that wants to show us within ourselves something that we have said I to that isn't I at all. And when we see that this sense of self isn't I, it never was, in that moment we lose our life and we find it. That's the purpose of our talk today. Ordinarily, I'd be asking if you're following me. I can anyway. It wouldn't hurt to take a quick break, ask you, are you tracking? Have you seen something parallel to your life? I'm not asking you to believe me. Only fools believe in gurus and teachers and would-be life coaches who, by the way, can't get out of their own way. If you knew the truth about the people that you look to give you a helping hand, you would see that they never give you a helping hand without putting their hand in your other pocket that you don't know is going on. That's a fact. An impression we don't want, because we need, in quotes, authorities. We need heroes. We need icons that we can call on to get us out of the moments we don't want, instead of doing the work that we must do to discover the nature that refuses the impression, that doesn't want to see what we need to see to put two and two together to be free. So, transition. Nice deep breath. We can't talk about impressions without talking about the forces that create them. It's raining, it's foggy, it's cold here in Southern Oregon. I have the impression of a gray day. Now, why would it be that the impression of a gray, rainy day, why would that include any form of negativity? Is the negativity inherent in the rain that falls from the sky that feeds the spring flowers? Is the negativity in the momentary absence of the light so that all that lives might relax for a moment and experience a different relationship with another order of light that's still there but can't be seen with the eye? No, there's no inherent negativity in any impression. But when you and I have an impression of what she said or what they did or what might happen tomorrow or what took place 50 years ago, those impressions are loaded, aren't they, with negativity, with a certain form of resistance. And this is what I want to look at with you, that we can't talk about an impression without talking about the forces that create them. For instance, the immediate impression of some kind of, psychological danger. Think about it. The immediate impression of psychological danger. I have to go to a meeting tomorrow, and I'm not ready. I should have done this yesterday, and I didn't, and now I'm feeling like I'm caught up behind all kinds of stuff. I'm never going to get there. I have to rush. So here's this immediate impression of some kind of perceived threat. But there's no threat in the unfolding of any set of forces that create an impression. Where's the threat in an impression? The only threat there is, in quotes, in any impression comes out of the nature upon which something is impressing itself. So that there's always, in these instances, these negative reactions. These negative reactions are inseparable from the resistance to whatever we perceive the moment as delivering us to. I just knocked my clock over. Give me a second. My room is not set up properly. So, can you see that? Something in us perceives the moment and takes the perception of that moment, the impression of it, as being negative. The moment that we perceive a moment to be negative, whether it's one that's coming, one that we're in, so to speak, in the split second, or in the past, what happens to us? Here's one of the first truths that we have to put together. Don't write it down, just listen. Negative reactions, the nature of them, seem to insulate us. Negative reactions seem to provide an instant space between ourselves and the offending moment. And in that space that seems to appear between ourselves and the offending moment, we have the possibility of a host of thoughts that show up and tell us what to do and where to look to free ourselves from the moment that has offended us. I hope you can understand that. Negative reactions seem to produce a space between ourselves and the condition we don't want. There is no condition we don't want that can be separated from the consciousness that doesn't want it. There is no condition that some moment brings to us that we don't want that can be separated from the consciousness having that experience. So really what we don't want in that moment that we don't see is the experience of ourselves. But a negative reaction gives us this feeling that now we have choices to make to isolate, to prove to ourselves that the pain is the result of someone or something else acting outside of us. Can we feel any sense of threat without feeling that some sense of security that we've depended on is at risk? Even going back into the past, you go back into the past, painful moments. What's pain? Where's the pain in the past, if not in reliving a moment where calling up the experience brings up the same feeling of being insecure or not worthy is in this moment as it did back then? So what happens, please, when something that we're identified with gets shaken up? What is it that happens to us? First, let's remember this. Negative reactions isolate us. They isolate us in a world where there is this idea, these thoughts that we can call on to resolve the pain of that situation, but a situation that doesn't exist outside of the consciousness that sees the moment in the light that it does. So what happens in these moments, these negative reactions? Please, I hope I don't go too deeply here. We never have, honestly, any reaction, but we're talking about negative reactions right now. Every reaction is, in fact, a moment of creation. There is no reaction, whether it takes place between the sun and the tree, between the tree and the roots and the ground that it feeds. There's no reaction in any form of creation that isn't a moment where opposing forces meet what they are drawn to. The sunlight is drawn to the leaf that requires the energy. The leaf that requires the energy, when it takes in the active light, because it is not the same nature as the light that is acting on it, resists a great amount of that light. Therefore, we see color. The rest of the energy is used by the leaf to feed the tree. So the point is that every moment of creation includes, as it is taking place, the resistance to the reaction as part of what is being acted on, but that what is being acted on and resisting that light is doing so as part of the moment of creation. When we have a moment that we don't want, you say something to me I don't like. I read something that upsets me. Can we have this moment where we are resisting the condition unless we came into the condition already acting from a certain kind of body of thought, feeling, physicality, without coming into that moment with something that already had established a relationship that was set, and that the new condition is threatening the established sense of self, what it desires. So that there's no resistance to a moment that doesn't appear because I have a desire that it didn't happen. My desire is that this happens, it doesn't, now I'm resisting the moment. So this sudden action within myself, this summary resistance in that moment appears without effort as part of creation itself, I might add, a new desire. There can't be a disturbance in the matrix of consciousness without that level of consciousness desiring something that will restore it to a balanced place. Creation never stops seeking balance. The reintegration of itself as it is acted on by something greater than itself to bring it into harmony with itself. So here is this moment. Suddenly I'm disturbed. I'm out of balance. You know the feeling because you're negative. And in that moment of negativity, that is, by the way, isolating me from the full impression, a desire steps up. It says, here, Guy, here's what you need to do. You need to think about this. You need to go there. You need to establish a new square one, fill in the blanks. So that in that matrix, at that level of consciousness, a new desire rushes in to provide a preferred sense of self because because the desire before was lost. Desire replaces desire. But in nature, all of this takes place seamlessly. When, for us, a negative reaction brings up, I'm going to change this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to fix you. That desire that we feel in that moment can only look to the level of understanding that produced the conflict to tell us what it is that has been taken and what it is that needs to be replaced. So that we are no longer in the actual moment of the reaction. We are outside of the moment of creation. Again, there is no moment of creation that isn't the essence of a reaction at some level or scale. This is evidence. Physics proves it. But we live from a nature that when there is this reaction, instead of recognizing, which we're going to go to the second truth now, every reaction, though we do not see it, doesn't prove difference the way we experience it. Doesn't the reaction you have to someone that upsets you prove that you're different than that person? Doesn't the reaction you have to revisiting a painful moment in your past prove that you are somehow innocent from whatever it was that preyed on you back then? Of course it does. Reactions like this, negative reactions, resistance, proves there's a difference between me and what I'm reacting to. God, this is important. That's what it means when I say negative reactions isolate. They seem to prove I am not whatever it is that this reaction is bringing up in me. And I wouldn't be like this if you weren't like that. And that's called judgment. So that negative reactions always come with an unseen form of judgment that blames the condition for the consciousness being experienced. And when that divided nature blames the condition for the experience of its own consciousness, the impression of the unity of that moment is lost. And inevitably, time and space is created in thought, because now I know everything I need to do, everywhere I need to go, all the things that need to be changed if I'm ever going to be whole again. So the first truth is that negative reactions, and the more we identify with them, derive a sense of self. The less control we have, the less possibility we are given in that moment by that reaction itself that you cannot escape. What would you think if you could talk to a grapevine and it was pulling its leaves in around itself, sheltering the grapes and everything? You say, what are you doing, grapevine? I don't like the heat. I don't like the kind of light. My roots aren't in a very good place right now to allow these conditions to do what they want to do. What would you think? You would see, you say, listen, Mr. Grapevine, you can't escape a reaction. You're trying to escape the reaction that you're having to what life is bringing up in you and revealing to you about your possibilities, the high and low of it. We can't escape reactions. I swear to you, without seeing it, the majority of your life is the attempt to either escape a reaction that you don't want, control the conditions that you blame for those reactions, or in one way or another, change your relationship to those conditions so that you can have control over your reactions. You cannot, how shall I say this, because it seems contradictory. Yes, you can control your reactions, and that's killing you. This isn't licensed to be unkind. It isn't licensed to flash anger. You do it anyway. And by the way, do you know when finally you explode, or finally all of that crud comes running out of you? It's when the resistance reaches a certain peak and you can no longer contain the pain inherent in trying to hold all of the reactions in some place where you believe it keeps you in a positive light. You can't escape your reactions, and you're not intended to. Your reacting nature, this lower self, says you must, because in the light of those reactions, you see things about yourself you don't want to see, let alone know. Now we need the second truth to put together with this idea about negative reactions. A closer look, God willing, meaning one day we're not so quick to identify with the summary rejection of whatever it is that we blame this pain on. A closer look at a negative reaction proves otherwise. Here's the closer look. All reactions, including the ones we don't want, are in truth the result of a timeless act of unification. Every reaction, as above, so below. Is there any reaction that takes place in creation that isn't part of the reintegration of nature as she is, bringing out of herself a new conception born of each reaction, so that rebirth is inherent in creation, and that you can't have creation without the adherence, without these positive and so-called, without something acting and something resisting. Every reaction, including the ones we don't want, are an act of unification. Every reaction is the ceaseless rebalancing of what is whole and made holy again. We come into this life, our reactions tell us, because of the judgments they throw out, that we're not whole. Isn't that what a reaction does? I don't like myself. I don't want my life the way it is. I can't bear seeing these things. I'm going to have to find some way to change the conditions. Doesn't every reaction that we have isolate us, insulate us, seem to protect us, and then give us a way, in quotes, to make ourselves whole in time? When I get this, when you become that. So that for us, holiness is something that's downstream. What is true and good and godly, we're apart from, but one day we will get there when we finally get past all of our sins. Who is it that casts you in the light of that sin? I'll tell you who casts you as someone who lives in sin. It's a nature that sins by trying to keep itself in place and holding you as a subject to its desires. So this main truth, first truth, reactions, negative reactions, they isolate us, they insulate us, they keep us from the unity of the impression. What if back in the day when I was being told, you know what, you're the most self-centered person that ever lived? What if back in the day I summarily rejected it because, well, that's unkind. What's wrong with you? You're a terrible person for saying that, because that's what we do anytime anybody finds the smallest fault with us. What if, to whatever extent, as was true, I was able to realize, you know what, this is true. I don't want it to be true, but it's true. The impression has its own take. The impression becomes something living, because it's formulated out of things that are brought together in that moment between the condition that reveals the consciousness and that which the consciousness does not want revealed about itself. So these moments of reaction is the evidence of an unseen similarity between what is being acted on and what is acting on it. Could sunlight act on the vine, the grapevine, if there weren't a similarity between the two? One's this ball of gas, light, heat, up in the space somewhere. Another's this vine growing little balls of sweetness. What's the relationship? There's a similarity, a necessary similarity. And the necessary similarity is that the vine, The branch requires what the vine feeds from the sun. That's their similarity. Their similarity is necessity. They need one another. And they need one another in order to continue the development, the unification of their relationship, through which is revealed the perfection of that moment of creation itself. I hope I'm not losing everybody. As above, so below, is life never not ceaselessly rebalancing itself. Not humanity. Humans don't rebalance anything. Nature does not endlessly rebalance herself. The worst disaster, that, by the way, we call a disaster because we have personal interests in it. The worst disaster is the rebirth of the entire matrix of whatever that disaster acted on. And what comes out of that disaster is stronger and more adapted, more pure in its relationships to what's possible in that moment of time. If that's true in nature, why isn't it true in me and you? That's the impression we have to have. That this moment where everything in me sees the moment as separate and apart and a punishment of pain is because it is perceived by a consciousness that doesn't want to receive the impression that it, as it is, can't be separated from what is acting on it. What is an impression? What is any impression? Can you have an impression? Touch your hand. Can you have an impression without something touching something that resists it? And is not the experience of that moment, of that impression, both what is acting and what is being acted on? They belong together. This is the whole business of what's the sound of one hand clapping. There isn't. Consciousness cannot be separated from the impression. So that we have an endless series of impressions, all of which, if we were capable of being present to them, would reveal to us that the moment of this reaction, and life is reaction, but we have to kind of drill down and pull one thing at a time, that this moment doesn't exist from what it's acting on. What you said does not exist without the consciousness that it is acting on. What comes out of what you said and the consciousness that it's acting on cannot be separated from the marriage of these two seemingly separate forces. It seems to us again that what acts on us, especially that we don't like, is very different than you and I. It's not me. That's not me. You have brought up what you have brought up in me. This is a phenomena. Why in the name of God would I blame any human being or anything outside of me for what it brings up in me? There is a relationship between what comes up in me and what acts upon it. Just as there is a relationship between the spring rains and the ground that absorbs it. They are made for one another because when they are unified as they are in nature, together they bring forth the seed moment. They bring forth the moment in which something is meant to be reborn. Not reincarnated, reborn, remade. And it is in the impression of seeing without separating myself from what I'm observing that there is just this moment. There is just what I see. Oh, how I fail. Please, you and I, when we're with each other, when we're seemingly coming up short, when we meet a limitation, the fact is there's just what we see, but not for us. Because what we see isn't the totality of that moment. What we see isn't the fulfillment of that impression. What we see is what we don't want to see. What we see is what shouldn't be there. I don't see you who sets me off. Because if I really saw it, there would be nothing more to do. Because I would understand, you can't set me off unless there's something that has come into this moment prepared to be set off so that the whole thing can be seen. No, I don't see you. I see who you shouldn't be. I see how you shouldn't be. I see why you shouldn't be that way. And every last reason I have for what I don't see is coming from a nature that can't afford to see what's in front of its eyes, because what's in front of its eyes is itself. That's all that's ever before our eyes. The minute we see what we don't want to see comes the temptation of imagination. Instantaneously, a desire that seems to have been thwarted, meaning my dependency that you act in a certain way or what I have to be content, in a heartbeat, once that sense of myself is challenged, that nature requires a new sense of self, and it acquires it through the next desire and the identification with it. And in that moment where we are tempted, did you know, interestingly enough, that in the Lord's Prayer, the idea, and lead us not into temptation? Did you know the original meaning of those words thousands of years ago, not the way they're interpreted today? Lead us not into temptation. Please keep us from trying to complete ourselves according to the images we have of ourselves. The temptation is to make myself whole. That's the temptation. And why is it a temptation? Because there's something in me that believes that God isn't good. I say I love God. I say I love the truth. I love Christ. I say all these things. And yet when the moment comes, who do I turn to restore what I call wholeness, to make things holy again? I look to my own imagination to provide the next thing I need in order to get through a moment that only exists because of that consciousness itself. So here's what I'm getting at. Every moment, and every moment, if you want, I've spoken of this, the idea of the Big Bang. In the beginning was the Word. All these ideas connect to a certain understanding that this is the beginning. It's never not the beginning. It's never not the living Word. It's never not the moment in which the Father is acting on the Son. It's never a moment in which the sun in the sky isn't acting on the grapevine. It's never a moment in which there isn't this divine reaction where something is giving itself up to what is acting on it, and giving itself up to what is acting on it because it understands that it is a singularity, that the Father and the Son, that the divine and what it manifests are a singularity. Not separate, but something in us cannot stop separating it out. And when this nature stops the revelation of this impression of the unification of the moment and the rebirth that comes out of it, when this nature does that, think, what sense would it make? Would you cut off the vine? Would you cut off the branch from the vine before it gives the fruit? Would you bring an end to the fulfillment of its possibility by cutting it off before it flowers? We have this idea. It's just entrenched, it's conditioned in us, in this idea of I'm here, I need to get there. I've lost control of this, I need to gain control that way. We can't see that there is but one life, one birth, one death, one reaction, eternal, never not unfolding and revealing itself to be what is timeless and holy and unimaginable. We struggle to understand something like that because we live from a nature that can't see as yet the truth of that. Why would I limit? Would you go someplace beautiful? I saw a documentary last night. I saw the most beautiful waters. Why am I drawn to these massive waterfall, the beautiful lagoon, the sparkling coral reefs? Why am I drawn to that? And when I'm drawn to the seascape, the mountain range, the majestic sequoia, when I'm drawn to that, is there anything in me that says, you need to limit this impression? Or do I want to drink from that impression as fully as I can? Because there's somehow, in the strength of that impression, the depth and the breadth of the soul receiving it are seen as being inseparable. There's no pain, there's no suffering, there's no wanting, there's no anything missing. If I were present, if I am present, I want to drink from the cup completely. There's nothing about the impression I don't want. And we can see that's true. But what about when it comes to the impression in a moment that you've done this or that they've done that, or my life isn't going to go the way it's supposed to, or that I've just received some death, I've just learned about something terrible about my health, and the end is all there. Oh my God, I can see the end. Well, that's not fair. I'm this, I did that, I'm looking at what's the impression? Who's giving me that impression? And you understand, I never understand what's creating that impression, because something in us cuts us off from the revelation, from what's making that revelation, from what's making that impression. We cannot become awake. We cannot begin to understand what it means to even approach the idea of letting the impression complete itself, until we no longer fear what is revealed in that impression. We cannot be free until we no longer fear our own impressions. And we will always fear our impressions when we don't understand what is being impressed upon us by that nature that does not want to know anything about the depth and breadth of its consciousness, because it doesn't know what to do with what it doesn't like, with what it doesn't want. We reject our own reactions, believing that the rejection of my own negative reaction is going to help me realize a path around it. It's not the reaction that's being rejected that we resist. What's being resisted in that moment by the fact of that reaction. Did you know that wherever a reaction is opposing forces? Do you know wherever opposing forces meet, obviously there's an equal and opposite reaction, but there is a summary form of light. The light is the impression and the thing acting on it. And in that moment, if we can understand this even to some small degree, there is no disturbance that doesn't... In fact, what is awareness other than the awareness of myself? The awareness of a disturbance. The awareness of a disturbance. So it's not the reaction that's being rejected. What's being rejected is what I'm given to see in that reaction. It's not the reaction that's being rejected. Something in us obviously summarily resists it, but I'm trying to show you something. The reason that reaction is being resisted, rejected, is because in that reaction there is a faint light that outlines things that we don't want to see is true or know is true about our consciousness. How would I have ever understood what X was telling me about my self-centeredness? How would I ever see, in fact, to this day, how deep runs this self-centered nature with all of its spheres. Isn't it fascinating? Did you know the more self-centered a human being is, the more afraid they are? How would there be any awareness of that fear, any distaste, as there should be, for this self-centered life, unless in the moment when that nature is stirred into an awareness of itself, something in itself says, I don't want to see this. So I'm going to limit the impression. I'm going to steal from this impression what is required for it to become whole, holy. Because as we come to discover, and can we please bring up the second key lesson as we come to a close? The deeper, the stronger any impression, any true impression, the greater our inner strength after it has passed, if only we will dare to remember when it comes to its appointed hour. The deeper, the stronger any true impression, the greater our inner strength after it has passed, if we will only dare to remember it when comes its appointed hour. If you've ever had an addiction of any kind, that one day you finally saw for yourself, you know what? I've always had the impression that I was the victim of something, that I was subjected to this, and that's why I became that. No, when a man or a woman starts to throw off the yoke of that temptation, of that addiction, he throws it off because he begins to see. She throws it off because it starts to be clear. That I am not what I've taken myself to be. And that in this fear of being inadequate, I have turned to things to make me adequate. In my fear of not being loved, not being cared for, I have come up with reasons to prove that I'm not adequate. All of these things, and suddenly the addict is what? They have the strength of the impression they saw that of themselves. As Christ said, they could do nothing. They saw, I can of myself do nothing. Why are you calling me good? I saw it. The impression was there. It was clear. And even when the temptation returns, as it does, to think about myself, to anger, when that temptation comes, lo and behold, that impression that coalesced because I agreed to let it reach its fullness, it's there. The disparate parts of oneself have been integrated into a clarity, into an understanding that cannot be put aside. And it goes before you in those moments, and it says, sure, the feel's real, but the why's a lie. You can see, I get it. I know why you want to say this. I know why you want to be afraid. But you have seen that the fear belongs to a part of yourself that isn't you at all, and that must not be fed, it must be starved. You must give yourself up. Here's the exercise, as best I've been able to say it. Refuse no impression. Refuse the appearance of no reaction. It seems to us that when we are reacting to a reaction, we are taking the necessary steps to protect us from how we feel in that moment. Do not try to resolve a reaction with the mind. The reaction does not start at the level of thought that seeks to resolve it. The reaction does not start at the level of thought that appears after it to resolve it. The reaction belongs to something far deeper, fundamental. The reaction belongs to that which is trying to reconcile heaven and earth, what is full of light and what is yet in the dark. The reaction is trying to rebalance through an act of karma, a system of justice, so that whatever it is that needs to be changed will be changed, but not because the self is trying to change itself, but because it relaxes and releases. It says, would that this cup would pass, but not my will, thy will be done. All of that. Refuse no impression. Agree to allow each seed moment, and each moment is the seed moment. Allow it the awareness. Keep it in the light of that awareness to serve the purpose it was called into being for, which is what? To bring together in that split second the realization in the depth of that impression, and the stronger it becomes, the freer you are. that which I see is not separate from that which sees it. And that which I don't want to be or understand, or that I reject, is inseparable from a part of me that wants nothing to do with it. And to see all of that impression all at once, then you realize you see all sides. And that's the beginning of the coalescence of conscience, the beginning of a new order of being that never stops agreeing to be reborn, because it knows that which acts on it is greater than itself, is there for the good of itself, and it exceeds to that goodness. It doesn't fear the change that its own unconscious nature says is going to cause it loss. You understand that there is a part of you that cannot act against itself, because it is a part of everything that it perceives. It belongs essentially to what is divine. And so do you, and as you begin to realize that these reactions that at first they separate, they isolate, they insulate, because we identify with them, but understood properly, which is your task to want to know and to enter into the realization that these reactions are never not giving birth to something new, and that you are intended to be made new every moment, but only as you accede to allowing the entirety of that impression to have its way with you. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.
All right, everybody. I'm gonna give a couple of announcements, and then we can come back. First of all, next Sunday, we haven't done this in quite a while, and we're going to be doing a deep dive Sunday, a week from today. And what we do is we take the time to explore material that you, the audience, have submitted for Guy to look at and explore more deeply. So, and that can be anything from a talk like today. You can, a great one that struck me, refuse no impression. I'm sure Guy could elaborate on that even more. So some of these things, they can be simple lines. You don't need to write a tome of 3 pages. You can just write simple questions. And that's what we were looking for. If you want to write it longer, that's okay. But it doesn't have to be anything more than that. Some things that from videos, books, audios, or you can take a favorite master that you like and would like greater insight into. And you can do that by just sending your question to guyfinley.org/contact. And again, that's next week. So try to get them in early in the week. That helps Guy be able to look through them and encourage you to do that as soon as you can. Okay, and then just one other quick announcement that another simple way to help us in the mission of spreading this work to everybody who might be interested is to follow Guy. If you're interested in doing this, follow Guy on one of his many social media accounts and interact, like comment and share with the posts there. So if you're on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, by the way, Guy has 65,000 followers on Instagram, 25,000 on YouTube, and 15,000 on Facebook. So there's a good amount of people following. And if you're active, all it takes is a minute to help promote this work. A like, a comment, a share, and that really helps us. And as Guy has said, this work is moving more towards an online work. That's where it's going when Guy makes his move and all of that, but we will all still remain together as a body, wherever we are. So you can help us by doing that. I think for now, Guy, that's all we have, and I have to ask you directly, how is your energy? Do you want to keep going, or what would you like to do here?
No, I'm fine. Let's do as we would ordinarily do.
Okay, all right. I would ask that everyone who does ask a question, we want to go ahead and raise your hand if you're on GoToWebinar. I see one hand there. Is to be concise as best you can and to give your question to Guy. And if you want to write a question in, you can do that either here on GoToWebinar or in the question box or in the chat box of the other places. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. We've got Tony Tony John's in the queue. Here is Tony.
Thank you. Hello, Guy. Good to see you.
Hi, Tony.
You look fantastic. I'm very happy. Did you have that surgery?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy to see you doing well.
Thank
It's
you.
a sign of good things. I am so grateful to you because I think maybe months ago now, I was sharing an experience at my job, and you very strongly told me, do not react, do not make them feel they're wrong. So somebody was just making unilateral decisions despite everybody, you know. Anyway, of course, the problem kept recurring over time. And I learned to accept it and let it go through and even handle it with humor. I was very pleased, just with humor. And then guess what? The person resigned. So what happened? I don't understand. You mean because there was no fight? There was no more. Why would they resign? I mean, it's interesting. Why would they just not transform themselves?
Well, I think, Tony, that first of all, you know, that's kind of a wonderful, semi-miraculous result born of your wish to discover more truth about yourself. And we can all kind of have a little smile as how that works. But let's frame it in a slightly different way, as you know I tend to do, because we can relate it directly to what we just covered in this material. First, resistance by its nature, as I said, seems to, in one way or another, separate us from what we're resisting. So that here's this rude, aggressive, toxic person, as they may or may not be, and my summary reaction to them is to resist them. And I've yet to see that somehow or other, as the saying goes, the more I resist, the more the condition that I resist persists. That's the nature of resistance. It creates what we call second force. For every action, for every form of resistance, there is an equal and opposite reaction, something more to be resisted. So as I lay that down, the matrix, the consciousness that was engendering those conditions change. And it may or may not be, it doesn't matter, that this person was drawn in some way to being in a constant struggle. And when I no longer struggled, they no longer saw a reason to be there or that they could control something. It doesn't matter. The key is always to bring it back to ourselves, Tony. Always. What I resist strengthens whatever it is that is being resisted. It doesn't really strengthen the condition, but it strengthens the conditioned nature that believes you, he, they, this shouldn't be that way. I said it in the talk. There is just what you see. There is no, it shouldn't seem like this. There is no, it shouldn't be seen like that. All of that belongs to an after set of reactions. If you just see how painful it is to be in a constant state of resistance and leave it there, then the energies inherent in the moment of those conditions will begin to teach you what you have learned about how that continues. And in the awakening to the continuity of the conflict that you blame on others as being something that you're contributing to, you lay it down. And when you lay it down, you are laying down not just yourself, but the circumstances that self creates. Literally, time changes, and in this instance, that person goes away, and you're free to move on to the next lesson, which there will be. I hope that helps, Tony. Let's go on, Doug.
Okay, probably on my end, I'm having Barbie get off the thing. It's been cutting in and out, so hope you can hear me okay.
I can hear you.
We'll go, if you can, I'll go to a question, and it's from Jordan, and he says, Guy, How can I start taking this spiritual work with a pinch of salt? I take everything you say way too literally. You will say something about the nature of wanting and not wanting, then I'll be fully convinced to not have goals of full-time hobbies anymore. My head is wrecked with all these conclusions I'm creating. I miss my hobbies. How can I be more easy on myself daily while still doing this work?
Jordan, try as best you can to see the contradiction in your own statement here. I'll rephrase it so that you can see it, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I'm making an absolute wreck of myself by trying hook or crook to become what you have said I need to be in order to be free. And the more I try to be free, according to what I believe you have said, the more limited my life becomes, and the fewer possibilities, let alone the pleasures of just simple living, are present to me. Where is the problem, Jordan? Is the problem in what I have said is important to be seen? That there's something in us that never stops looking at a moment through the eyes of this old nature, and then finding fault with the moment or with myself, then turning to that nature to tell me what I need to do to escape it? No, Jordan, you simply have to see what's right in front of your eyes, like I had to see and must see every day. I can't afford to see how possessed I am by some idea of what it means to be successful. I must recognize without flinching, and if I must flinch, then let me do so, that everything that I've ever told myself constitutes freedom now or in a time to come does not do that, save for fleeting moments that are as temporary as the conditions that allow it. If I just see, if I don't take the impression of myself, as you've said, how literal I am. Well, if I know that I take everything literally, what's the answer? The answer is I have to stop taking things literally. But if you started to work there, Jordan, you would discover that you can't do anything other than that. That's what I don't want. I don't want that impression. I refuse the impression that all I am capable of in the moment is what pushes or pulls on me, and that plies me with some kind of promise, and that I run fist over hand, whatever that, I run, I rush, I'm anxious to acquire what that nature is telling me I must do or I must no longer do, and I'm powerless. Those who seek power seek it because they are afraid of being powerless, and those who are afraid of being powerless have created for themselves the conditions that make them afraid. Just live for one moment, Jordan, refusing nothing about what you see about yourself. Confusion, chaos, anger, frustration, like some dark wheel of unfortune just spinning. It depends what spun the wheel and where it lines up. that up comes inside of me all of these negative reactions, all of these fears and doubts, and no negative reaction appears without some affirmation that that negative nature tells me I have to reach to and run to in order to escape myself. You've heard, every one of you have heard 1,000 times, be present. Not try to imagine what it means to be present and to feel yourself as being present, but to be present itself. The full impression. The more full you can receive any impression, Jordan, of yourself. Can you judge an impression of yourself, Jordan, that doesn't limit the depth and breadth of the impression being judged? Doesn't the judgment of any impression separate you from the impression itself that now you feel needs to be judged? Just agree to accept the impression. I am a mess. I am in pain. I am afraid. But in the wholeness of that impression, realize that what is saying and feeling I is only a part of that moment. And if you would let the whole of the moment reveal the part that claims to be the whole, the impression would reveal to you that it's already changing and you would change with it. And then you would know where to look and what to do with these impressions as they come up. That's the best I can do.
All right, Guy, let's go next to Fiona in the queue. Here's Fiona. Hello, Fiona.
Hello, Doug. Hello, Guy.
Hi, Fiona.
Good to see you. All the best for your recovery.
Thank you.
I love all the talk about the Big Bang, where I've been given to see that any slight thought or even the tiniest move that I make is the Big Bang happening at every second. But what I was really given to see on talking about really big revelations is it's okay you're taking yourself forward in any way, physically, mentally, emotionally, as long as you put the last first and the first last,
yes.
Which is a really easy metaphor to say, but I really felt like really deeply felt that and could explain it in about an hour, but that's the nuts and bolts. And also what has become good to see is that it's not, you've spoken about, which is a fantastic way. I mean, honestly, I listen to any time that I've gone through something major, whether it's a major operation, I'm literally tuning into what you're saying. As soon as I wake up, it's just so vital, this work. And you've spoken a lot about picking flowers. When you're given something to see, sometimes it's a wee flower, sometimes it's really a big bouquet or a whole, nugget of gold worth of revelation. But that's fantastic, and that's hopefully, hope to God that can be remembered. But it's also to be not not thought about and kind of sitting and camping out there, just, have that revelation, but it's
yes.
Being open as well, not having an idea of what that revelation means.
Yes. I
think is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. I'll say it to you in a couple of different ways, Fiona. It'll help you. I hope that others can follow. A revelation, a true revelation, has no structure. But there's something in us that wants to make a structure out of every revelation. And the clearer it becomes to us that we suffer from self-created structures, from a consciousness that requires structure. In this world, we have to have structure. This world is a structure, a natural construction. But in this natural world of construction, of nature improving, strengthening herself, Nature has been created within us that can't go forward without a structure it makes for itself. And every structure that it makes for itself becomes the fear of that structure being dismantled. And when something shakes the structure of this self responds by strengthening the structure or finding something new to build its form around and upon. Your true nature, Fiona, my true nature, does not have a structure. No moment of creation has a structure. It is an expression of something divine structuring itself in time to reveal what is timeless and without structure. That's the real challenge of the spiritual life, is the eventual revelation, the impression that the only thing I've ever suffered from is identifying with some conditioned structure made in the past by myself or by generations before me, from which I derive a sense of security and an endless sense of becoming because I can always strengthen the structure. And then you see the very attempt to strengthen or keep the structure in place as the source of your fear and everything that you don't want, and the whole thing begins to dismantle itself. You don't dismantle it. The intelligence itself reveals it doesn't need structure, and then it escapes the slips and bonds of that structure that was self-created, and you become a free human being. That's what you're excited about, even though you may not know that fully yet. That's where we're headed if we'll do our work, Fiona. You copy?
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was on mute. Excellent. It's priceless. Guidance, really incredible. Very appreciative.
I'm happy that we're together.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, Doug.
All right, Guy. We have one more written question, and I think Kate has sent it to you. You read it before, she said. This came in through email, and would you like to go into it now, or what's your thought?
I didn't get it via text. Look, let's take the last few minutes here and we'll do what we can, and we do what we can. And if we don't do it well enough, which is possible, then we'll revisit it during our deep dive. We can always learn more.
So this one is from Cece. And she says, and Kate has edited this down. She says, I have a childhood friend, Denise, whose mother, for many reasons, was very overprotective. Denise was never allowed to leave her yard, and the few times I convinced her mom to let her out, it didn't go well. The last time she fell in love and got hurt, Denise was brilliant. She graduated college with honors, won the art award, and had so much potential. But after the heartbreak and graduation, she just stopped painting. She stayed inside until her mom passed away. Then Denise's sister stepped in to control her life in the same way. It's as if Denise had been conditioned to accept being controlled. But isn't this kind of isolation a form of abuse? Even if she were mentally unstable, which I doubt, why to this extent? Now her sister has passed and her niece is taking over. Denise just accepts it without question. I don't understand why. I plan on driving to see her next week because it may be my only chance to ever be alone with her again. I want to help her see she has a right to her own life. What can I say that will actually get through to her?
A couple comments, Cece. And this is true of anyone and with anyone. Do the best you know how to do with what you know how to do it. Do the best you know how to do. What else can you do? But this I would add, and strenuously so. Don't make your demand that she be the way you remember her into something that causes further pain for her. When we meet people with the insistence that they be in any way whatsoever how we want them to be, our insistence is because of the pain we feel over them not living up to the image that we have of them and ourselves. Don't let pain be what you bring into that relationship with her. Don't let the idea that you love her hide the pain that's trying to change her back into what you need her to be so that you can feel about yourself the way that you want to. So it's two things at once, Cece. I know you're a student. Do the best you can. I love you, Denise. I've always loved you. But I don't think you can see what's happened. And then be aware enough to know that when you try to get people to see what they can't see, they're not going to go, oh, thank God you pointed that out to me. They're going to reject, they're going to resist what you bring to them. So it may be the best way to help this person that you love wouldn't be to try to change them at all, but to be a changed person in their presence. So that in your attitude, in your bearing, in your demeanor, you are creating nothing but open doors, open ways in which she might be able to see what is missing that was once upon a time, that should be or could be, but that will never be as long as you try to produce or push something upon her to make that change. That's the best I can tell you. And that's all, folks. I'll see you next Sunday in our deep dive.
Okay, thanks, Guy. Great discussion, great talk today, something we can all use, as we well know. So just, Guy, Kate asked if you would just stop the live button. That way the other Facebook